Okay, so now for something a little different. Let me get my first picture up here so you guys have an idea what I'm talking about. One of the life-changing things I learned over the last few years was that to be free, I really needed to be aware of what was inhibiting me. And that at the root of this inhibition was fear. We all have fear, and I have embarked on a journey to become aware of it and therefore increasingly removed from it, so I can begin shaping my life without fear as an inhibitor. In this process, I also discovered my own intuition. And I'm learning to distinguish it from fear in important situations. So, this is slacklining, a little more mellow. It's a balanced sport. Some of you may have heard of it. Now I've seen some hands go up, which is good to know. But most of you are probably thinking of tightrope walking, circuses, hippies, and the like. But this is different. Tightrope walkers actually balance on round steel cables that are completely rigid and taut, whereas slackliners balance on flat woven bands, which we call webbing. Now, the biggest difference is that the slackline is dynamic. It behaves a bit like a rubber band when under tension. That means that when I move, the line moves. Also, slackliners have no pole. We use our arms and our center of weight for balance. Rock climbers invented slacklining about 40 years ago when they needed a rest day activity, and they found that balancing on their climbing gear was both active and fun. So a few people became pretty passionate about their new activity, and they started walking longer lines and eventually higher lines. This is the birth of the sport that I love so much, highlining. So the first highliners were true pioneers in the sport. Tightrope walking had been around for generations, but slacklining was fresh and new, and there was no knowledge of successes or errors to build upon. These guys literally took what they were doing between trees and moved it 3,000 feet above the ground, crossed their fingers, and took a step. Now, I found slacklining in my hometown of Austin, Texas about 5 years ago, and I had no ambitions to walk thousands of feet up. I was a normal person. But I think a lot of people don't know their full potential or even realize what they're capable of. And the first time I set foot on a slackline, I said something along the lines of, "That's really neat, but I'll never be any good at that. It's too hard." I had normal jobs and the same fears many of us have: sharks, spiders, taxes. So I kept seeing the slackline in the park, and eventually my intrigue led me to try it again, and soon enough I was hooked. I had never found an activity that generated so much focus. And with slacklining, my success was entirely dependent on my own mindset, my positivity, and my determination. A few years later, actually 1 year later, I went to Europe on a journey, and I accidentally met some people who were highlining and climbing, and they introduced me to the highlining part. And I found passion and purpose like I had never known before. Now, I had balance skills just above the ground, but when I set foot on my first highline, everything I thought I knew was out the window. To stand on a shaky 1-inch line over an abyss, every iota of my body was telling me not to be there. I was challenging thousands of years of evolution to stay away from the cliff edge and keep my feet on the ground. So, fear of death, we all have it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that death is imminent. Highlining looks pretty shocking for most people who don't practice extreme sports, but it's actually safer than one might think. I want to give you guys a little bit of information to put your minds at ease. When I rig a highline, everything is redundant. That means 2 of everything. In case one line breaks, I have a backup. Here you can see I'm taping the lines together so that you're still walking on one line, but you're safe in case one breaks. The majority of highliners wear harnesses, as you can see here, and the harness is attached to the highline with a short leash. In this way, if the highliner is to fall, they only have a few feet of rope to climb in order to remount the line. As a highliner progresses in the sport, they learn to catch the line rather than falling completely off. This basically means that in the moment right before falling, when I'm shaking and I know I'm going down, I would go forward with my body and grab the line with my hands and my legs. And it sounds difficult, but it actually saves a lot of energy if a line takes more than one attempt to cross. I'll talk about highliners who walk without safety a little bit later. So, in most cases, highlining is not life-threatening, and it's important for me to know that each time I set foot on a line. Despite the knowledge that I am indeed safe, fear can be a powerful force. In the midst of the void I walk over, my heartbeat accelerates. Oops, sorry, there's a mic over my heartbeat. My heartbeat accelerates, and the vertigo unhinges my brain, and adrenaline is pumping through my veins. But inside, something is transforming. The other voice is growing strong. The deeper, knowing voice that tells me I am safe, that I can do it, that what I'm doing is fun. I try to visualize success. I imagine stepping onto the anchor on the other side and feeling solid rock again. Sometimes I even imagine being around a warm campfire that evening with my teammates. When I'm on a highline, my mind is racing with elements of fear, the combative voice of logic and confidence, but then there is something deeper, a deeper knowing inside of me, a certainty that I'm exactly where I need to be. You see, often on a highline, the biggest challenge is not physical, it's actually mental strength and control. So, to recognize and identify fear, I had to become intimately acquainted with it. I find fear to often be an emotional response, a belief that the world is somehow unsafe or negative. And the more I experience that type of fear, I realize it is burdensome and should not be a guiding force in my life. So when I'm on a highline, I must constantly strive to clear my head. Fear of failure and falling can be really strong. And sometimes other aspects of my life creep in as well. Financial woes, car troubles, social issues. My head gets cluttered with negativity and I start to lose balance. I must do everything I can to calm down and regain control. So I start by using logic. Am I safe? Yes. Do my teammates want me to succeed? Yes. Can I walk this line? Yes. So using logic first really helps combat the fear, because fear is somehow false in this situation. When I'm harnessed in, I'm not going to go anywhere. Then I breathe deep and try to slow my heartbeat down. Here's a nice trippy photo for you guys. It's an office building. This is how I'm relating to the corporate event. So in the past, I wanted to train myself to be fearless. However, I've realized since that it is neither realistic nor necessary. Fear will be present. However, if I can accept it for what it is, I can walk through it. I often tell new highliners to keep taking steps, no matter how shaky those are, because fear does not equal failure. To really get in the right mindset to deal with my fear, I had to go beyond analyzing it. I had to perceive it differently. There are times now on a highline when I can use the fear as energy and power, rather than seeing it as an obstacle. That's part of what makes highlining fun. So I also figured out that combining humor with fear is a great way to dispel the stress. This is just one example. I've also walked highlines in bunny suits, chicken suits, between speeding semi-trucks, and pink spandex, all sorts of things. And high heels, that's one of my proudest achievements. So obviously there are times when questioning fear is not the best idea. I was in Yosemite last weekend, and if a bear was chasing me, I probably wouldn't stop to ask myself, is this fear logical? What is my intuition saying right now? I would probably just run. But I think everyone in this room can tell the difference between the instinctual, survival-based fear and the what-if fears that many of us deal with on a daily basis. I really lament the fact that we don't have more words to describe fear in our language. I think there are many types of fear, and I feel there's an inadequate way to describe them. Highlining is intriguing for me because it really seems to fall in between the instinctual, survival-based fear and the what-if fear that I'm familiar with. So here comes the intense part of my topic. Intuition became a much more important part of my life when I began walking highlines without safety. So that's called free solo. In the beginning, it was plenty of fear management for me to walk with a leash on. However, as I progressed in the sport and became immersed in it, I found myself pushing my limits further and further. And by the time I decided I wanted to walk without safety, it was after diligent mental and physical training. I needed to trust in my ability completely before I even considered taking the harness off. Now, there's a certain peace that comes with the acceptance of risk. With highlining, especially without a harness, I can't have any delusion as to what can happen if it goes wrong. However, acceptance of fear doesn't mean that I feel invincible, nor does it mean that I am fearless. It was a bit of a slow coming revelation for me that being present in the moment can be really freeing. Now, I believe that the present moment is the only true reality, because the past has already happened and therefore cannot be changed. The future has not happened yet, so it doesn't actually exist. And this is true on a highline in the extreme sense. Visualizing success is a great method to direct my life in a positive way. However, being self-aware and accepting the present moment for what it is a really important step in walking through fear. So it might surprise some of you, but fear of death, yeah, it's one of my biggest fears in life. And I mentioned becoming intimate with my fears earlier, and this was about as close as I could get. Being on a highline free solo with no option to give in to my fear allowed for some pretty incredible transformation. I realized that past fear, past logic, and even past confidence, there was something deeper, an inner certainty that was being illuminated through my walking. At times, I can hear this true self clearly. Being solo on a highline, I feel completely naked to myself. I can see all the thoughts in my head, even my ego. The positive thoughts and the negative thoughts all become apparent. So to push my limits this far, I really needed to listen to my heart as well as my head. And I think the journey to understanding my own intuition will last my entire lifetime, but that's the important part, the journey. Now, when I approach a highline to walk without safety, I must listen to this inner dialogue very intently before I go out there, because once on the line, I cannot second guess myself. I have to be totally committed to the walk. Intuition can be clouded by fear or ego, and if I cannot discern between them, I keep my safety harness on. However, at other times, I feel an indescribable determination. Even though I know I'm physically able to walk a highline without a leash, as soon as I take it off and go out there with no safety, fear grips me. It takes all of my energy to stay calm on the line as fear tries to shut my body down. Even with thoughts of dying nagging at my mind, I have to walk the line with a very strong heart. I must trust in my ability to balance and my ability to listen to that inner self. Now, the feeling after a solo highline walk is, of course, relief, empowerment, but utmost freedom overall. So, to my mother's discomfort, I took an unusual route to learn about fear. But it's really translating to other areas of my life, such as decision-making, love, and of course, skydiving. I have no conclusion for you guys today, because I'm in the midst of my learning. Highlining has given me a completely new perspective on life and a new perspective on myself as a person. I really am aiming to face future challenges with the same intuitive thinking, focus, and presence that I have learned from highlining. And ultimately, I have discovered that for me, freedom is a life that is guided not by fear, but by integrity, action, courage, and self-awareness. I'm not striving to be fearless, because fear can be a great teacher. If anything, it reminds me of just how alive I really am, which is a wonderful thing. And in this process, I'm learning to feel the intuitive self in me, which is really a journey worth embarking on. My time clock isn't working, so I'm not sure how much time I have left. But I guess I will finish up anyway. I wasn't sure coming here today how to relate what I do to everyone in this room, because I think we have quite different definitions of freedom at work. But I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really thankful to Tracy for inviting me. And this is giving me even more perspective on life. The last talk was really incredible because it really gave a great real-world perspective on fear, which led into my otherworldly perspective on fear. So thank you guys very much.